We want to hear the stories from the courses that you've taught. Whether in a lab, a classroom, kitchen, on Zoom, or in a shop. Drawing on your expertise, we'll ask the probing questions. What goes right and what goes wrong when teaching your favorite lesson? Welcome, everybody, to My Favorite Lesson, a podcast hosted by Teaching and Learning at Conestoga College. I'm Dr. Lauren Spring, and today I am here with Laura Turner, who is a professor in our Healthcare Administration and Service Management program. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Lauren.
Thank you so much for being here today.
I am thrilled. I'm a podcast listener, so the fact that I'm on a podcast is about the most exciting thing that's going to happen to me in quite some time.
It's pretty cool, huh? It is pretty great in this media studio with the headphones and the mics and I agree. I'm a podcast listener too, so it's fun to be on the other side, as I always imagine myself. So, Laura, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you ended up at Conestoga? Kind of where did your career start and what was the path that led you here?
So I'm an occupational therapist by background. I started out working in pediatrics with children and youth with disabilities. And I then started taking leadership positions here and there, leading therapy teams. I dabbled in a little clinical research and came to Conestoga in 2014 in the occupational therapist, physiotherapist assistant program, part-time. Okay. Fell in love with teaching. Absolutely fell in love with the college, inspiring young minds. I did that for about 2 years, and then there weren't other opportunities, so I went back and did a few other leadership type things until I came back to the college to lead the accessibility and student-facing learning services, and that was in 2016.
Okay.
Yeah, and then in 2018, when this program started, I came into the program right off the bat. It was wildly popular for students, internationally trained healthcare professionals, and it's been a career highlight teaching in this program. So I've been teaching full-time ever since then.
Wow. And what is it that you love? Clearly, you know, your first experience back in 2014, it sparked something in you. And what do you think it is that you love about being in the classroom?
I feel inspired by students. I think that we have as much to learn from students as we do to teach. So I find the way that they think inspiring. They teach me about tech tools and what's new in education. I often lean a little on students to kind of, as my daughter would say, she's 15, keep me relevant. So I really feel passionate about education, and certainly as we get into my favorite lesson, it's been a beautiful marriage of my occupational therapy training, my clinical experience, and then using that skill set in education. So it seems to be such a good fit for me and feels like this is exactly where I'm supposed to be in my career.
Wow, that's a great feeling, huh?
Yeah, it's funny. I joke with my students. I tell them I'll get up in the morning and say, Conestoga, are you going to pay me again today to do this? This is amazing. Yeah, that's the feeling that it is.
Oh, well, I mean, and how nice for students to have someone at the front of the classroom who feels that way, right? Who's excited to be there. And
I think so.
And so just going back to, you were talking about your experience working in pediatrics with children and youth with disabilities. What did that look like? That was sort of as an occupational therapist?
Yes, so I did work at a children's treatment center, actually in Waterloo, called Kids Ability. It was just the most incredible place to get a start in my career. Not only was I surrounded by very skilled therapists who tucked me under their wing, because as a new grad, you know less than you think you know. You really have so much learning to do. But I think what I learned about was resilience in terms of children and youth who really had to put a lot of work into everyday milestones and faced so many challenges and barriers, and watching their families cheer for them and building a participation team around them. It just taught me so much about the environment and how actually that's the most disabling part, that it's not often what's happening with us. It's that the things around us don't support our participation. So clinically, that's my focus now, is I focus on the environment, really building environments to support performance, getting those barriers out of the way without necessarily changing anything about the person. Sometimes that's not where we need to focus. And so then I've been able to package up those skills and bring them into the classroom, meet students where they're at, and really help students to celebrate their strengths and skills, develop their superpowers, and not focus so much on the deficits or the things they're not good at. Certainly, they might have to have a certain foundational level skill, say in finance,
Right.
but they don't need to be the finance person, right? You really build relationships with your colleagues around you who have expertise, and you bring your authentic self in the room and use your skills to your best ability.
That's really nicely said. And I mean, the disability rights community has made huge strides recently. What I hear and what you're saying is that kind of shift, right, from the sort of individual model or the medical model of disability to the social model, and saying, okay, here's an individual who's not fitting into the architecture in this space or the institutional regulations that we have, whatever it may be. And then this shift, wait a second, it's not them that's disabled, it's the environment around them that's disabling.
Exactly. And so I think that fits so beautifully in education when we talk about universal design for learning and accommodations. Really, if we're doing our job, our best job, to make it a place that's safe, welcoming, and accessible for every student, the need for accommodations is generally fairly low because we've covered our bases, right? We've covered our bases through assessment, through the way that we teach the content. That's what I get excited about, is that it comes to me so naturally, and then I see what that looks like in the classroom for students.
Wow. And so clearly, I mean, and then your experience at Conestoga working with accessibility must have sort of furthered some of these things and you know, familiarized you with this particular institution. And then obviously you bring these sort of insights into your teaching and into the classroom. Is it part of the subject matter that you teach too?
Absolutely. So I think as faculty, we need to really come from a place, students know themselves best. And we may have a version of success that we lived with going through the education system. Right. But one of the things that I do with students early on is I have them come up with their own definition of success. And I really give them a permission slip to move away from just a marks-based version of success. Right. And, you know, what does it mean in terms of your communication skills and your confidence as an emerging leader and who you are as a person and who you're becoming. And that, because of my love of positive psychology, my background in psychology and occupational therapy, that's how the curriculum's built, is that yes, you are learning communication skills, but it's in the context of who you're becoming as a person. And we know that's a lifelong adventure, right? That there are iterations of that. But I think students feel that it's so refreshing that people see their value, right? That I see their value. I encourage their colleagues around them to see and celebrate their value. That's a game changer.
And I mean, certainly within Universal Design for Learning, one of the key things is, okay, the why of education, like why are you here? And I would imagine an activity like having them just define success for themselves, like what does that mean for you in this course, in this program? Do you find in asking students that question, is it challenging for some to get outside of that paradigm of like, well, marks and a job? And then have you been surprised by any of their answers when they do sort of go deep into that question?
Yes. So I think at the start of the semester, they would say marks and job. Okay. And then we get into the curriculum that I'm going to tell you about that's focused on mental health and wellness. And then partway through and towards the end of the semester, they're saying, wait a minute, I really care about my free time and my connection with the people that I love and making sure that I have a balance. And maybe I don't need it to be, air quotes, perfect. I can let this go and turn in this assignment so that I get to enjoy my weekend or a few hours on a Sunday. So I really do see attitude shifting and changing throughout the semester, which is so exciting to me because these are skills that students can carry with them for a lifetime and not get mired in productivity culture where they have a singular focus and maybe things are falling away and other areas of their life are suffering. So how can we have a big, beautiful life that also involves joy and ease? I mean, I think that's the ultimate question. And we explore it in this course, which I think is pretty fantastic given it's a communication course.
Wow. Okay, well, let's get into it. So tell us about this course and then the lesson that you've brought to share today.
So as I mentioned, it is a communication course and it is centered in leadership and healthcare.
Okay.
But I've been able to really creatively push the edges in terms of embedding mental health and wellness curriculum right into the content. And I can tell you a little bit about how that works.
Yes, please.
What I wanted to tell you first, though, is that I really think that fun and learning need not be mutually exclusive. So, Lauren, if you were arriving to my class, there's always music. So I'm there ahead of time. Everything's set up. There's always music. Students get to pick the music if they're there, a little earlier.
Nice.
Last week, a student wanted to hear Ed Sheeran, so we put carpool karaoke up on YouTube just because I think it signals for students I'm shifting to whatever might have been stressful before I arrived to the classroom. Maybe the bus was late. I had to get my kids out of the house. I worked the night shift. So it's really this invitation into what feels, I want to say, a little sacred. Like I think our classroom experiences can be sacred in that we're designing, ritual and routine, and students know what to expect, and they're happy to be there. So we've got the music playing, you're grabbing your name tent, you're getting settled, and then we always start with a meditation. So this is a hybrid class. In class, we use Richard Wangamese' Embers. So students pick a meditation, and closer to the middle of the semester, they'll read the meditation. At the start, I'll lead by example. But online, so this mental health and wellness curriculum is taught online.
Okay.
And we experiment with a variety of guided meditation. The coolest one I found lately is from the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, where basically there are several pieces of art, and an art expert takes you in and out of the art, the brush strokes, the form, the technique, and there's music in the background, and we loved that. So we always start with mindfulness. We also very recently folded origami at the start of class as a way to just settle in, put our phones away, use a beginner's mind to try a new skill. Students love that as well.
And I see you brought a little example with you here today.
Just to remind me to tell you about it.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So students got to take it home. They were so thrilled. They wanted to learn more. And the other part that I'll tell you about is after we do our meditation, we do small talk. Every single class, we have 3 questions on the board. And that day it happened to be, what's something about your childhood that you loved? And of course, when we talk about what we loved as children, that's a huge clue about how we should spend our leisure time. If you loved riding a bike and you haven't ridden a bike since you were 12, it's probably time to get out and ride a bike again. So it was just such a lovely marriage of let's play a little at the start of class and then talk about how we played as children. The other really important part of our class is we check in with each other at the start. We don't ask, how are you? We ask, how is your heart? And at the start, students struggle a little bit with that because, in social conventions, when we say, how are you? Often we don't even mean it. We don't pause to tell someone how we are, but we're trying to really get at, how are you arriving to the classroom today? So students expand their ability to talk about their feelings, how they're arriving in the room, if they are feeling any stress. And it's really transformational. So they will talk in their small groups about their hearts, and then they answer the 3 questions, and then they'll come back as a large group. Depending on how many students are in the room, they'll present individually at the front of the room, just 1-minute answers, and it's how we start every time. So it's kind of this gradual invitation into the curriculum. And then, of course, we don't play the whole class. We have theory and other things that we do. But it just...
You've set the space.
We set the space.
The energy, yeah.
And you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the first time I was in a meeting with an Indigenous elder. And instead of careening right into the to-do, there was a gorgeous meditation and a blessing and an invitation. We miss that in our spaces. We really miss out on a key opportunity where we're not even checking in with each other. We're just seeing what's on the to-do list and seeing how quickly we can work through it.
Right.
I don't know that serves us.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much interesting in what you've said here. And I go back to, you're asking them their definition of success. And I think there's the rote one or that's kind of prescriptive, but then here you are showing an example of like, actually you can bring your whole person here. You
Yes.
can share how your heart's feeling today.
Right.
And, it's not necessarily just about the learning outcomes or the agenda. We're going to get there.
That's right.
But I also care about you as a person and what you value. And
Yeah.
I think that sense of ritual in education is really quite beautiful too.
Mm-hmm.
And especially I suppose in an increasingly secular society as we are, and also one that's so diverse and people from very diverse cultural, religious backgrounds, et cetera, in the same space. It's a really interesting thing to try to create this sense of ritual as a classroom community.
Mm-hmm. I think about it a lot because all of the students that I teach are newcomers to Canada. They've taken this brave leap and left their support system behind. And so if we can create classrooms that have that sense of community, that I come here and people care about me, that we care about each other, that is such an opportunity for us to realize. Yeah. And it's so interesting because in all of this that I'm telling you, I know for certain that it also impacts attendance. So students generally attend well in the class. And I had one student say to me, ma'am, I was going to sleep in today, but I was afraid my friend was going to tell me about what I missed out on. And then I would wish I got out of bed. So we get to just bring our authentic selves. Not everyone is going to do this the way I do it. And that's the beauty of bringing your authentic individual self into the room. Right. But I will say, while also maintaining awesome boundaries. Okay, so you're really dancing through this, establishing rapport, bringing yourself, but maintaining the boundaries. And I really offer a heartfelt thank you to my OT training for helping me to understand boundaries in very nuanced ways and to be able to do this very well, where I'm not friends with my students, but they know that I care about them and they know what the limits are in terms of how we interact with each other. Right. And if they've got an issue, they know that they can come to me, but then I'll be helping them find a college support. Like I'm not operating.
You're not going to take all that
exactly.
on. Yeah.
No. But the fact that they stand bravely in front of you to bring up any kind of issue, even if we don't know what to do, we need to find someone that does.
And fortunately, the college does have lots of resources, right? Like, and faculty are not on their own in those cases.
No.
And so I find that really important what you're saying about boundaries too, because I would imagine a lot of folks who maybe haven't considered starting classes in this way might be fearful, right? If you're asking students what's in their hearts at the start of class, they likely have a lot in there and, might open the floodgates. And
it's so funny. I've never had that happen. I just have never had it happen. And if it did happen, I would very confidently say, you know what? I am listening intently to what you're telling me. And it sounds like that is something that's so important to you right now. Let's have a conversation after class. Like I wouldn't be fearful. So I also come from a very trauma-informed lens, very careful around content warnings and coaching students on sharing and being only so vulnerable that you don't go away feeling like you hadn't shared that much. So it's hard to explain in just one podcast, but there is so much method and so much theory and structure to the approach that I bring that makes it work really well. And students, I would say, on the student appraisal of teaching, they feel respected, they feel heard, and that's where the learning happens. When you can lay that foundation, students will follow you anywhere. They will learn about anything you bring to the front of the room. But that's the part that I love the best, is really establishing that foundation for the semester and then carrying on, bringing up novel, creative ideas, surprising them in ways, talking about things coming up on the weekend or sharing photos or whatever it is we're doing. It can be novel and playful too.
Well, and I think that sense of play, like I love this origami thing, right? Involving the body and like you're saying, something that most people don't know how to do right away. And so you're kind of reverting back to like when we're kids and you're learning something completely outside of your comfort zone. While still recognizing, I guess, and that sort of trauma-informed lens comes in, that students also find security in structure, right? And so saying, okay, we open our class like this and we have this ritual, and then at a certain point we move on to, the content today, and it's going to be a slightly different maybe approach, or but that their structure, I mean, their safety in that kind of structure too.
And I'm sitting here a little fearful that my colleagues are saying, okay, well, when is she teaching the content? This doesn't take a long time. It's really, 10 or 15 minutes at the start of the class. It's a 3-hour class. So I think that if we pick quality over quantity in our curriculum, right? Because we know that sometimes there's things that we could probably take out or cut down. This to me is worth it. It just, I like to think that we are training and teaching a generation of leaders who are going to go out there and care deeply about their people and not be afraid to get vulnerable and be a little playful. The first time I read a meditation out loud, I was terrified. I thought, are students going to think this is okay? But I think that's part of it too. We might make mistakes along the way. We might introduce things that don't resonate, and then we don't take ourselves too seriously and we move on.
Yeah. And even say, check in with them. Be like, did that work for you folks?
Exactly. Or I'll laugh at myself and go, that didn't really go as planned, but what did we think? And yes. Yeah.
I see so much value in that. And so this particular lesson that you wanted to share, so we're in a communications class. We've had this sort of, this really nice kind of ritual and welcoming. And then tell us more about this particular.
Yeah, so I did kind of pick the highlights of what I love the best about this 4 workshop series. It's a series of 4 workshops. So day 1, we're talking about self-care. And come on, we know that self-care is not as simple as, I'll just get in the bath or I'll go to the spa, right? We're looking across the continuum of wellness to include cognitive wellness and physical wellness and occupational wellness, spiritual wellness, all of it. So really, I'm helping students to understand that it's a bigger concept than what we might see on Instagram. And so they're exploring for themselves how much they're already engaging in self-care. So we're doing a bit of a time use study here, right? Where we know more recently there was an author, Bridget Schulte, who talked about time confetti, where we actually have quite a lot of spare time in our day, but we're using it in ways because often we're using our phones where it seems like we have no time. So I'll say to students, what are you doing to engage in self-care and, of course, leisure, all embedded in OT theory? They're like, I don't have time, ma'am. And I'm like, okay, everybody, let's get out our phones and let's just look at the time use stats. Like how much time, we're not going to feel shame about it. We're not going to feel bad about it, but like how much time are we spending on our phones? And they're looking and going, right? I'm spending a lot of time on my phone. So I think part of it is just building awareness that we can make intentional choices about how we spend our time, and that I'm giving you a full permission slip that to get through this program, you don't have to study 12 hours a day. You are going to work smarter and not harder, and you're going to get out and enjoy nature. And if you love to read, you're going to read. And if you sketched at home or when you were a child and you want to do that again, full permission, because we are creative beings. And when we abandon that side of ourselves, it doesn't bode well for our happiness.
Right.
So that's really embedded right in that self-care section. We move quickly into leisure and really just have students develop an awareness. And often they're coming from educational settings where you are expected to be learning and studying and focusing, 12 hours a day. So I have to do this in a way where they don't think that if they do this the way I'm talking about, they're never going to be successful in life, right? That they won't get a job.
Because that's been the model,
But that's not it, because I stand at the front of the room as a successful person who's got this really enriching life that I love. And I do work hard, but then I also play in the background and recharge so that I can be the best version of myself at the front of the room.
Right.
Right? When we take impeccable care of ourselves, that means we can take impeccable care of the people around us.
And if you're going into a care profession, like I can see this being especially important. Like anyone I think could benefit, but especially those going into care work, right?
Right. So they are potentially training to be future healthcare leaders. And so they will be leading teams who are on the front line caring for people. And we saw through the pandemic what that meant in terms of no balance and no life outside of work. And that's tough. We can't sustain that.
Right. Or you can for a certain amount of time.
Or
and
we
then
get sick,
you get,
right? We get sick,
burned out.
Right. And so our workplaces should care about this. Our workplaces should care that perhaps embedding this kind of content means happier, healthier employees.
Right.
Because they bring this foundation to the table.
And even knowledge, right? Even because it's so easy to be like, okay, self-care, and it's a commodity, right? And then, like, there's a self-care industry, and so it's easy to just latch onto something and think, okay, I'll get a manicure. Like, is that what we do?
Right.
And then, but that's not going to be fulfilling for a lot of folks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it could leave someone feeling even more void to have this exploration of like, no, like you, like, you know, that little child in you, what did they do for fun? What's like, and how can you bring that into your world? How can you care for yourself?
And even understanding, are you an introvert? Are you an extrovert? Are you somewhere in the middle? What does it mean when you recharge? Do you like to be in busy places? Would you rather be on your own? It's okay if you just want to curl up with a book. Like, you don't have to then go out, you know, and be social if that's not what recharges you.
Yeah.
So it's really knowing that we can be the best version of ourselves, and not long to be something that we're not.
Right. And so you were mentioning a number of your students. Most of them are international students.
They are all international students. Yes.
And so in many cases come from a very different sort of educational system and approach. Do you find, are they resistant to this kind of new way at first, or?
I don't think so. I think because I'm so confident in this, they quickly come along for the ride, right? I dress playfully. Yeah. The classroom feels playful, but they also feel confident that they're going to be learning because their confidence grows in their communication skills. So I'm not sure. I don't feel the resistance. I think they're curious. They're like, what is this?
Okay.
And then they keep showing up for it.
Right.
So I'm good with that. I'm good with that because I know that I will also teach you fantastic communication skills. You will leave this room more confident than when you arrived. And honestly, for some of the women in the room, that's finding their voice for the very first time, that their voice matters, that they get to have a voice, that they don't need to defer to others in the room. That's a big part of this class as well.
Wow.
Which is thrilling.
Yeah. Yeah, and core to communication, right?
Yes,
and
yes. Yeah. And it's okay if you make a mistake. It's okay if you feel like you said the wrong thing. Like, we need to be able to move through those uncomfortable feelings so that we then continue to put up our hand. We continue to stand at the front of the room.
Right.
So important.
Great. So let's hear the next part of this lesson.
Yes. So we talked about self-care. We talked a little bit about the environment in our closer to the intro, so we might not need to dive into that topic. But we also talk about things like spending time in nature and the health benefits of that, our social connectedness. We talk about hygge, which is the Danish art of cozy, which is particularly popular in the winter months when our students are like, what is with this weather? So we coach a little on, how to make your space cozy or feel more like home. It quells some of those homesickness feelings.
Sure.
We talk about self-compassion and kindness. We explore inner critic, inner mentor. We explore affirmations, boundaries. We also have a really fun activity where students share photos that express the emotions of joy, gratitude, love, fun, and happiness. And we also make a playlist based on those feelings. So it really is my love of positive psychology and my OT training that allows us to build this in a way that also connects to communication and leadership. Okay, so it's really students building this beautiful self-awareness, often for the first time, married with a reflective practice where they can kind of gauge, I did this over the weekend. How did it make me feel? How's my energy on a Monday? Do I need to rest more? Do I need to move my body joyfully? Like, what is it that I need to do? And then they can make a plan for themselves and try it and just dive in and do it.
Okay. Well, it's so interesting, I find, about that I've often found appealing when it comes to occupational therapy, positive psychology. There's something pragmatic about it. There's like, okay, here are all these things kind of swirling around. Like, what practically are we going to grab onto, and how are you going to make a change, or what's this skill that you really want to figure out how to do?
Yes, so because if you take it as a whole, it's completely overwhelming. But it's like I'm a little guide. Like, I'm just going to guide you. I'm going to tell you what I know about, what I'm focused on. Here are some other resources. You get to choose your own adventure. You get to pick and choose from these ideas, make them your own, pick what works, leave what doesn't. I love that.
And so how do you feel that this kind of series of lessons links back to communication and or leadership in healthcare? Like how does it how does this come together with like the learning outcomes for the course?
So I firmly believe that if we give students the comfort and the language to be able to talk about their own mental health and wellness, they then get to be leaders of teams where there's permission giving and a real open, honest environment about how the people on their team are doing, right? So if you yourself have the comfort and the language, you can instill that in your team, right? You would have no problem going up to a colleague to say, are you okay? I've noticed whatever it is, maybe you've noticed a behavior change, that you would be comfortable to just go up and ask someone how they're doing. So there's that piece. And then, of course, the link to healthcare is that we are in a sick care system, right? Our healthcare system really isn't talking a lot about wellness and health promotion because we don't seem to have a lot of extra funds to spend our money there. We have a huge aging demographic. We're really strapped for cash in terms of our healthcare system and how we allocate funds.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that we maybe need to lead this work, right? That throughout our careers and our busy lives, maybe raising children or caring for elderly parents or whatever it is that we're facing, our healthcare system traditionally maybe isn't the best in guiding us to know how to be preventative. And I can say this as someone aging gracefully. I don't know that there's a lot of resources in our healthcare system right now telling us how to age vibrantly. Like how can we age in the best possible way to ensure that we can live active, healthy lives for as long as possible?
Right.
We seem to have to figure out that a little on our own. So I think that the more we can embrace this as a lifestyle and understand what's out there and teach others about it, the opportunities seem pretty exciting in terms of the spread of this knowledge and making it accessible for people.
Well, and it's fascinating to me, too, the way, obviously this is working in the classroom in a particular way, but it sounds to me too, that you're almost wanting to change the culture of these medical systems or these, hierarchical relationships for leaderships in healthcare, and that maybe will result in better mental and physical health down the line, years to come.
This is a whole nother podcast. Yes, we have so much work to do in terms of really supporting the health and well-being of the people who are keeping people healthy and well. Yeah.
Which, and I think, often when people talk about efficiencies or cost saving, something that might seem like it is less expensive at the outset, down the line, if you have folks who are burned out and
that's right,
and having to take leaves, it's not actually right. So some of these kind of things, if they were valued at the start, might actually be more, if that's the argument you're going by, and I don't think, everything should be measured with respect to cost efficiency, but even if that's the form of measurement, I think there's probably changes that could be made there.
I think the other part for me is that if someone had been telling me this and offering me this as a 20-year, like as someone in my mid-20s, I would have had a head start and I would have maybe missed a few pitfalls along the way. In terms of productivity and career choices. And don't get me wrong, I am thrilled with where this journey has landed. But the ups and downs of that and, raising small children and all the demands, I wish I'd had a better foundation in this information when I was making some choices about how to spend my time and being generous with myself about needing to recharge and spending leisure time just for me. And that's the one book I have here that's all about that, finding your unicorn space, right? Is how do we really reclaim our creativity in a busy world, knowing that that's a core part of who we are.
Yeah. Wow, that's so interesting. And I wonder, as part of this program, do students have co-op placements or?
So they don't, but they do often look to their faculty around volunteer or work experiences. So I'm often coaching on that. And it's so interesting because a student came to me just the other day to say, I got a full-time job offer. What do you think I should do? And I had to be really honest to say, that you really can't expect to be successful in this program if you take a full-time job right now. It's just not designed for you to work full-time and study full-time. But I think when the government changed the rules so that our students can work full-time, it was kind of like I guess this must be okay and it'll work for me.
Yeah.
So it's sometimes being really honest about with students about how that could impact then their success in the program. So that's difficult sometimes, but just talking them through and saying, putting this on hold right now means that you can be successful in the program and not have to retake courses and not have to feel really tired and feel like you're not doing anything well. I mean, I think we've all been in places where we are persevering
Survival
and not
mode.
feeling like
Yeah.
we're doing anything well. I want
sure.
our students to avoid that if possible, because we know what that means for their wellness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And interestingly too, I mean, and I see it, I think that change of rules has been certainly challenging, right? Because we know students have very real material needs that need to be met.
Absolutely.
And would certainly be tempting to work in addition to studying, work for pay in addition to schoolwork. But yeah, it's a nice thing to be able to have those conversations with students and say, I know this seems really appealing right now, like maybe consider your budget, and because potentially it will cost you more down the line, right? If you have to retake courses or you're now committed to this job, which isn't actually what you're studying for. And if you could commit a little more to the program and then eventually maybe find something in this particular field. With more energy behind it. It's so tricky.
Yeah, and it's not about telling them what to do. It's like laying it on the table to say, okay, well, this option might lead here, here, and here.
Yeah.
But to your point, this option is probably a better choice for your long-term future career. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we are almost at our time for today. Is there anything else you wanted to say about the lesson before I
don't think so.
Okay.
I could spend a day talking about it, but I think we really did hit the highlights. And again, it's more of a philosophy or an approach. I don't think that focusing on the tech tools was really the focus, but more on adopting a philosophy or an approach in the classroom.
Yeah, and finding ways. What I'm hearing is finding ways for students to get in touch with different parts of themselves that matter a lot in the work world. And, as healthcare culture hopefully starts to shift over the years too, and to be able to know who they are, what their priorities are, what their values are. That seems pretty vital. So before we wrap up, Laura, I like to ask faculty participants if they have anything kind of, interesting about themselves, a fun fact that maybe your colleagues and your students don't know about you.
So I love this question so much because I think that what's interesting about us is usually not what we do for a living. So I'm a writer. I've written 2 books and a poetry anthology, and I'm currently working on a 3rd project that's about frogs and a mature woman's quest for love. And spoiler alert, that mature woman is me. So next month, I'm actually traveling to Iceland to a writer's retreat. The Prime Minister of Iceland, his wife is Canadian, and she's an author, Eliza Reid. She hosts this writer's retreat. So the idea that I'm combining my 2 loves, travel and writing, together is absolutely thrilling. So that's something interesting that people might not know about me.
Wow. And have you been to Iceland before?
No. And I am really excited.
That's phenomenal. And so you're going to be working on a project you've already started writing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The frog and the woman.
Frog project, okay. Yes. And I'm hoping to take a full draft with me to Iceland because there's quite a famous Icelandic author that's doing some editing workshops. So I'll be there attending workshops and talking to authors and understanding their creative process. And it's my favorite thing. So I'm really excited.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah. Thank
that
you.
Sounds like a great opportunity.
Thank you.
And thank you, Laura, for being here today. That was a really riveting conversation. And again, I feel like I've got lots more questions to ask you, but we'll leave it there for today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I've loved it. Thank you.
Well, we have come to the end of another episode of My Favorite Lesson, a podcast hosted by Teaching and Learning at Conestoga College. You can find all episodes in this series and more by following Teaching and Learning at Conestoga on YouTube. You can also find this podcast on Spotify and other places you get your podcasts. If you subscribe, you'll be notified each time a new episode becomes available. For 24/7 support for all things teaching and learning related, please check out our Faculty Learning Hub at tlconestoga.ca. I'm Dr. Lauren Spring. reminding you, as the great bell hooks once said, that the classroom, with all its limitations, remains a location of possibility. Until next time.